Are we on? All right, we're going to call to order at 5:31 p.m. And we'll start with roll call. Melissa, you want to handle that?
Let the record show that all members are present and one member is absent, which is Michael Love.
All right, thank you. All right, and if you're able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, do we have any white card oral communications? We do not, so then we'll go on to any changes to the agenda. Don't think so. All right, so we'll go to informational items. And basically, this is to let people know where we are with the mature tree ordinance. The draft, as we have finished it here at UFAC, is posted on the website. And we have been told that the next place it will go is the Environmental Commission on October 9th. So I don't think we have any deliberations to do on it, but we will welcome public comment. Is there anyone that would like to comment on this, Melissa?
Yes.
Oh, we got another one coming. You got someone to buy you some time there, Mark.
Is there an update beyond that?
Beyond what I just said, no. The draft, as we've approved it, is on the website as part of this agenda, and it's going to Environmental Commission on October 9th. That's the update we have.
Okay, we will start with Lori Forsyth.
Lori, when the mature tree discussion started in 2021, it was brought forth by Catholic Lakes Territory Grants. It was called Mature Tree Protection Ordinance. The goal was to make every effort to preserve significant mature trees. While I really appreciate all the work that you guys have done on this ordinance, I'm not sure why the protection was taken out of this ordinance when it first came through as a protection. It is still unclear how the replacement trees or the protected trees will be preserved after construction. What about neighboring mature trees near the property lines? They should be included and protected too. Other cities require safeguards of the trees after construction, some for 2 to 3 years. Santa Barbara protects the oaks that are planted for 3 years afterwards. There needs to be accountability after a tree is planted. As you know, construction stresses trees. Trees don't die in a day or a month. Sometimes these large mature trees die after construction ends a year or 2 later, or the replacement trees die off. They're the last things to be planted before construction ends. You see it all the time. Construction's completely done, protecting trees, and then they plant the trees and leave. So it doesn't really give them much time to protect during construction. It reminds me of the pine tree that I brought up on Requesa just recently, and now it's just disappeared. Construction, died, disappeared. There's a lack of protection for the trees after constructions within this ordinance. The city might have to follow up 1 or 2 years later, but that's the city making every effort to preserve and protect trees. There was discussion last meeting about how to check on trees. I don't have my glasses on. There is a right of entry permit included in every permit, making sure there's compliance, 2.7 Urban Forest Manual. This could be extended for 2 to 3 years afterwards, but there still has to be accountability for these trees. I'm disappointed the bond on the trees was voted down. I think this is an important issue, and it's being overlooked within this mature tree ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. And did we get the beginning of that?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have more on this item?
Yes, we have Mark Wisniewski.
Could we get that timer started over, please, Melissa? Thank you.
Good evening, Chair.
Hold on one sec there, Mark. We're still getting our bearings here in the new room.
Okay. Good evening, Chairman Lefkowitz and members of the UFAC committee. I served on the UFAC committee, the original one, so I'm familiar with the operation of it. I also served as a project arborist for a multi-housing unit project in Encinitas from July 21 to February 2024 and completed a detailed tree survey. The survey included appraisals for any adjacent off-site trees, and I used these two books, Guide for Plant Appraisal, 9th edition, and the Species Classification and Group Assignment. It's a regional supplement to the CTLA Guide for Plant Appraisal, 9th edition. I know that this has now been supplanted by a 10th edition, but I'm not familiar with that one. So I used these books when I did mine. I use both the trunk formula method and the replacement cost method. In other projects where I've appraised tens of thousands of trees over many years, I've used other appraisal methods as well. For the project I just mentioned, an 11.0-inch Ficus benjamina was appraised at $960. I thought it might be useful to know how this actually comes about, and I've provided two sheets that are showing the workup and the detailed computations that are required. Also on the same project, an 11.0-inch Juniperus chinensis tortuosa, a Hollywood juniper, was appraised, had two trunks for $4,830, and two Torrey pines with trunks of 50.0 inches and 51.5 inches were appraised at $43,400 and $43,600 respectively. And those were the highest appraised trees on this project, and there's about 30 trees total that were appraised. I thought it might be useful. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And again, this will be at Environmental Commission on October 9th, and it has been our intention throughout this, there's going to be multiple rounds of more opportunities for public comment as this moves on down the line. So with that, we'll go to action item number 1, which is approval of the minutes from last meeting, August 28th, 2025. Has everyone had a chance to review them? Does anyone have any changes or things they would like to flag on there?
Yeah, so I had a question about the accomplishments assignment we were given by City Council a while back in March. I wasn't sure about the dates, so I just wanted to make sure those were clarified.
Can you tell me what page we're looking at here?
Accomplishments, you just passed it. So I thought the original request was for the accomplishments for 2024, and in subsequent conversations with Melissa, it looked like maybe they want to go back to 2022 and all the way from 2022 to 2024. So I don't know if we want to clarify that here or
I think we'll have that on the agenda for next month, but as far as what's reflected on here in the minutes, is it accurate to what we discussed?
Yeah, I think that's accurate to my understanding.
Okay,
So other than that, I didn't have any comments.
great.
Just good write-up.
All right, is there anything else anyone would like to flag on here? I'll entertain a motion for approval.
I'll approve the minutes.
Motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Sorry.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion to approve from Matt Altman and a second from Mark Jenny. We can vote on approving the minutes. All right, that motion passes with all present members voting yes. Which takes us to action agenda item number 2, discussion of tree visibility and traffic safety issues. This was an item that had been brought to our attention by a member of the public several months ago that we had wanted to put on here. Is there any kind of presentation we have with this, or is it just opening it up for public comment and discussion?
There's no oral report.
Okay, so there's no oral report here. This was, again, brought up by a member of the public, and I think we'll start with public comment on that, and then we can discuss a little bit about where it can go from here. So we have some public comment for this one?
Yes, we have Mark Wisniewski.
All right.
Thank you again. One of the first early on items that the UFAC passed, and I'm sure Mark Janine recalls it, was using the San Diego Regional Urban Forest Council clearance standards for trees, San Diego County, California, 2010, to be part of any city tree contract for tree pruning. There's no, I don't want to see that. Take it off. Please.
Wait,
Thank you.
take what off?
I don't want to view the information that I sent.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. So as part of the standards, there's 2 items. 1.4.5, safety signs, signals, and informational road signs, line of sight, as detailed in local codes or ordinances, shall not be obstructed by tree growth from a clear view by motor vehicle operators. This includes street name signs and property addresses. 1.4.6, vehicle traffic at intersections and turning lanes, line of sight as detailed in local codes or ordinances, shall not be obstructed by tree growth from a clear view by motor vehicle operators. At the June 25th joint meeting between the Mobility and Traffic Safety Commission and the City Council, I showed some slides that showed traffic signs, pedestrian flashing signs, partially or completely blocked by tree growth. And so I've identified some problems. We got multiple parties responsible: Public Works, Parks and Rec, and private property owners. They all can have vegetation or trees that are impinging on clear visibility of signs. Again, it's not limited to trees. Sometimes there's multiple trees, but then also shrubs and other vegetation. And 3, apparently the city does not have an inspection and verification procedure in place to ensure that signs are not blocked by vegetation. So I have a couple recommendations. Regular, prioritized, busiest streets first inspections, required documentation of streets, numbers of signs blocked or will be blocked within a year, scheduled required work with appropriate contractors, verify work was satisfactorily performed prior to issuing payment, every street to be inspected at least once per year. Pruning recommendations: completely remove vegetation. So
You lost a little bit of time there, so you can keep going for a
Okay.
bit here.
completely remove vegetation so that it cannot regrow and block the sign again. This will reduce future work. When pruning any vegetation near to a sign, ensure that a clear view is maintained. In other words, you got the landscape maintenance contractor, say on Leucadia Boulevard, they're pruning all the shrubs down below, but the signs are still being blocked. Thank you very much for the extra time.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. So does anyone have any comments or questions on this item or anything they'd like to add in?
I have a question. Mark, did you try going through the My Encinitas app to report this as a problem?
No, but I've had discussions with the city manager, and my understanding is that action is being taken on this.
Okay, thank you.
Also, I'd like to point out that the comments are very good from the people that mailed in comments.
Absolutely.
The part of this whole process that seems interesting from the perspective of this group to me is that the challenge, what Mark has outlined is a pretty clear instance of a need, and there's an obvious resolution to that part of it, but we're doing a lot of big city streetscapes and young trees within those, first several years before you get to the point where you have these clear, permanent lowest branches and all. Maybe it would be worth actually having that be a better part of the planning conversation in some of the, whether it be installation, maintenance. It gets tricky because so many moving parts and multiple players, but young trees do seem to readily obscure new views even. So I think there's some relevance to this subject for us.
Right, so what would be, because it takes a while for them to grow and clear the view of the signage, right? I think in terms of what our options are, clearly this is an important issue. Mr. Wisniewski has made some very clear references to ordinances in place and maintenance ordinances. So I would just like to throw our support behind elevating this to wherever it needs to go, whether that be Public Works or city manager, to have the excellent comments made at the podium as well as the comments written in as a show of support from the public and the committee to make this a priority to address. Is there anything we could do beyond that at this moment that anyone can?
Probably vote on a measure of support. We could probably vote on a measure of support for Mark's plan if we wanted to.
One of the things that Mark was specifically targeting in what he described is the contracted maintenance, but who actually gets the eyes on these things in order to place those work orders and so on seems to be more on the city side of all of this. And it's not super simple because it's both Public Works and parks. So the irrigated planted spaces are parks and otherwise it's Public Works. And so what might be an important part of this as we just kind of like give our support to this is to have there be a concept of some kind of joint consideration between Public Works and Parks on who is responsible for specifically that type of assessment if it's not already a clear shared plan.
We could also make it a recurring action item for us so that the public could come and have a forum to actually discuss these things and we could annotate it and then source that up. Because it does seem like if it's a traffic safety issue, it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. So could the motion be to support the recommendations made by Mr. Wisniewski, voice our request to have some coordination between Public Works and Parks on this issue, and then in terms of revisiting it regularly, I think just knowing that this committee is here with the option to come in and make comments on any specific intersections or areas of concern, and maybe this is an agenda item that we do once a year for any updates from staff once some progress has been made here, and or open up a forum for further public comment.
I like the idea of getting staff to report back on what their action or their opinion is on this. I mean, it doesn't have to be annually starting now, but at some point when staff has had a chance to respond to this, I'd like to hear what they have to say.
Hanson, do you have any thoughts on how this might cross over with your day-to-day or anything that you could add in on this?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a concern because it's just, there's 1 million trees out there, or 20,000 trees that the city manages. And to view all of those trees every year is a pretty arduous task. So a lot of it is driven by public outreach from people. I mean, we do get a lot of requests and we do deal with it as they come in pretty quickly. And then, anyone who lives in Encinitas like me and drives around, you see a lot of it, and I just have a unique ability to be able to report what I see. But yeah, from a city standpoint, the way that we are right now is, at least from my interaction, it's just kind of an as seen or as reported basis at this point.
But this kind of review of blocking signs and traffic signals and things, this is part of your regular maintenance when you go through into neighborhoods, right?
It's something that I look for as I drive around, yeah. And the same with street crew. I mean, street crew sees a lot of this because they drive a larger zone than I do. I'm really request-based in a lot of my activities, so specific requests to specific trees. And then, I have other routes of inspection, like palm weevil quarterly, monitor list quarterly. So it's very like pinpointed and a lot of times similar routes. So it's not like I go to every street on the city. It's all request-based for the most part. So yeah, it's not a great canvas of the entire city.
May I offer a suggestion?
Of course.
This is an idea to try to address the problem that Hanson kind of teed up, and that is we have like 20,000 trees in the city, and all of them are growing and changing every single day. So it's a lot to keep an eye on, and traffic safety, of course, is extremely important, and being able to see the signs to keep our community safe, we have to keep those trees trimmed back. I think a big part of the problem is just that being able to see all of those trees and monitoring all of them and keeping, control of them is a big thing. So my idea is to enlist the assistance of our community, all of our residents, and perhaps establish some kind of a eyes and reporting volunteer workforce. So let's say, for example, that we could create a program where we had volunteers from different neighborhoods throughout the city who would be a docent or a point person for their community and would be trained and learn how to report on the My Encinitas app when a tree is obstructing a stop sign, for example. Like, I use that app all the time when I see things around the city, and my experience with it has been really fantastic. City staff responds to my inquiries, really fast, and it's not because I'm me, it's just because I'm a citizen in the city, and the city responds quickly to do things. So if we had some kind of a citizen team to be eyes and ears out on the street and to get things reported to the city, maybe things would get done more quickly instead of waiting for some routine maintenance cycle to occur. So that's my idea.
I would hesitate to develop a task force for this, or it seems like it seems like something that would get started with enthusiasm and immediately die out. The effort involved in keeping these neighborhood groups together and training them seems like a lot. But what if we, in the city newsletter, encourage people to report this particular kind of problem? I mean, people will report things that affect them directly and maybe not think about vegetation blocking the stop sign unless they get a reminder.
How about, I think I kind of got a happy medium here where I'm looking at the My Encinitas app right now, and if you go to roads and public property and report an issue, there is one thing here that says tree. That might be I would assume that would be when a tree is down in the roadway or something. But maybe we could just make a request to add a specific item for signage visibility to this My Encinitas app to create an avenue for the public to report this specifically, because I think people are becoming more familiar with it. I know a lot of us have used it successfully. So that might be a way, without going the length of a subcommittee that develops a team or whatever that has to be, that we are providing an avenue for the public to weigh in there. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
I think that's a good idea, but I think that there's a little bit of a missed mark in our discussion, because the struggle isn't responding to proactive input. Like people on the city side are already good at that. More of that would definitely be better, but I think that both the public comments outside of this room and what Mark has said here tonight have a different layer that's like more kind of proactive and planning and forward-looking. And so one thing that comes to my mind is that maybe we could have a little bit more of a conversation with Hanson about sort of a threshold that would trigger something being evaluated a little bit more deeply at the level of, like Mark mentioned, potentially removing something and having there be a different plant there in certain cases. I remember at the corner of Santa Fe and Lake, this was right before Hanson took over, and there's this big kind of a wall of ficus there, and it's a really tight turn. That corner is kind of scary on a bike, I can say that much. And there was a moment where there was a public submission of this needs to be addressed, that you can't see here, it's blocking, I forget if it was a sign or a light, something like that. And the response was immediate, and it wasn't even to initiate a work order for West Coast Arborists. Public Works staff went out there themselves with tools and cut that wall back to where it needs to be for clearance standards, but it's still a giant, quickly growing wall of ficus. And so maybe there's a way that anytime you might submit a work order, or even public, or on the park side, perhaps this could be combined. If there's a work order that goes to WCA or even Excel and it's focused on safety clearance, maybe those could get compiled and come to us with some kind of periodic opportunity for review, so that over the years, we're not essentially just doing the same bare minimum when there might be an opportunity to be a little bit more strategic and do a bigger move all at once and get to a better outcome as a result. Does this make sense?
So you're kind of want to identify regular problem areas, problem plant life, problem trees, so that, because we know some of these things are going to grow back and some quite quickly. So establishing some mechanism to regularly revisit things that we know are an issue.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And my focus through this group would be trees, but even in the public comment, there was mention of some of the lower growing stuff in some cases. It may just not be the right plant in the right spot in some of these instances.
So I think maybe our role here would be to make a recommendation to staff, to DUDEC, to Public Works, to Parks, to figure out that mechanism. I don't think it's our purview here to do that specifically, but maybe the motion here tonight is to make a request that is considered at the staff level.
Yeah, I would be happy to make the motion that whenever there's a work order that goes forward related to pruning for safety clearance, that there's some opportunity for our review down the road at least.
Compiled into a list.
Yeah, whatever seems to make sense from the staff side of things. I don't think that we need to be too directive in this. If it was something quarterly, if it was something biannually, it may amount to something that there's a big pile all at once, and then eventually we kind of get through it. So I would be, go ahead.
Can I just comment on that? It would be surprising to me if there wasn't some sort of tracking mechanism already of problematic spots. So I would be curious if there is or not.
There's tracking for everything. I mean, I would say that majority of the visibility issues get addressed in-house because it's either, maybe Excel, which is not reported because they're just constantly, parks. I mean, maybe Brian can speak to that a little bit. But if it goes through the city specifically as a work order, the city does do all of, most of that visibility work, not WCA, just because of the height requirement. They can deal with it in-house. And in that reporting ability, the work orders are there. They're very detailed and searchable. So that could be an avenue. Not speaking for the city specifically in that, but the tracking is there for those requests that come in through the city from my Encinitas specifically.
And is there another city commission or panel that would be working with Public Works or the transportation?
Traffic safety.
Right. So I mean, I just wonder if isn't there a forum and a whole focus on traffic safety and signage being clear, and maybe it's not being done effectively, but
Yeah, that's where I think kind of voicing what our priorities are here clearly, and then having Melissa pass that on to the appropriate channels above so that someone can reconcile it amongst the commissions and staff to be addressed properly. I think what's important for us here is to recognize the public comment, kind of offer some of our input here, and then pass it on up the chain to see where it goes from there.
So what if we sent Mark's report or his suggestion to Public Works with a question about how they think the best way to address this is, and whether they have a way of keeping us involved to see if we can offer any help as they go forward.
Melissa, do we need to formally vote on a list of items here, or can we just kind of compile some notes on what we think is important and you can take that on?
Well, we could punt this till next month and somebody volunteer to come up with a specific set of suggestions that we can vote on pretty easily, I think.
I mean, I have a list right here. If we need to vote, I think we could do it.
what's your list look like?
So support for the recommendations from Mr. Wisniewski. Request for coordination between Public Works and Parks. Request for input from the city manager on the general coordination of that between DUDEC, Public Work, Parks, and other commissions that may have some purview here. Look into getting a specific item added to the app for signage visibility issues on report an issue under the roads section there. And then a request for some kind of regular work order review at this committee to see what areas are regularly coming up.
If that was a motion, I'd vote for it.
Just a question on that last top point, are we creating work that, are we creating more work for the city that's not necessary?
I think we're just voicing our support for some coordination amongst these things that already seem to be happening. And
The last one where they're reporting and tracking.
Yeah, the work order review is a request for more work. That's correct.
I can kind of speak to why I think that part is important, is because I'll allow Hanson to chime in here too. There wasn't a point where I, working as the city arborist, would take the opportunity to notice that this tree is always in the way of this sign every several months, and have that be something that initiates a discussion of whether or not that tree is suitable for that space going forward. And so maybe it's different under your regime, but The reason that I think that that's a valuable conversation to come to us is because some trees are not the right tree for the right place, and as it stands, I'm not confident that anybody from the current operations matrix is going to be saying what I just said.
Are you dancing around the fact that some trees may need to be removed?
You know, one of the people who got me involved with this group, Brian Bishop, told me something very simple that I think is actually quite enlightened, which is that bad trees are threats to good trees.
Well, thank you for stating that on the record.
Well, I would defer to your guys' judgment on that. I just want to bring up the point. So I'm happy to support the list that you.
Yeah, I think it's a request for, to pass this up the chain and get some input on kind of all these ideas and how to coalesce it into a workable improvement that's clearly, top of mind for a lot of people right now in the city, and we've got some public comment to support that. So should I restate that as a motion that we could?
So I think the thing that's missing from that list is what would be helpful in a motion is to say what happens to this list. We're going to go on record as supporting this list. That doesn't seem to go anywhere. We want to bring this to the city. Who's going to bring it to the city? Where in the city is this going to go to? So maybe some a little more specifics on what happens to that list. I think we're generally supportive of the list, but just how to implement this is probably needs fleshing out.
Melissa, would voting to pass this on to the city manager be the right place to pass it to, or is there someone else that we should try to get this in front of?
I would probably have maybe Rob Tobin or get his input on it, because maybe he can offer some more insight.
Okay. Well, maybe then we'll take city manager off of this and vote to pass it on to Rob at Public Works, correct? And then that's putting our request in one place, and Rob can offer his feedback, and it can either come back here for further discussion, or he can take it elsewhere if that's appropriate. Does that sound right? All right, so let me try this again. I'll make a motion to voice our support for Mr. Wisniewski's recommendations, ask for some coordination between Public Works and Parks, ask for an addition to the My Encinitas app for the public to be able to report issues with visibility and road signage, and ask for Public Works to explore the possibility with DUDEC of some kind of work order review to identify regularly occurring issues with specific trees or plant life.
Before we vote, can I suggest an addition to that list, which would be to ask Rob for suggestions on how to deal with this kind of problem, rather than just give him a list of solutions. Maybe ask him to think about these possible solutions and let us know what his thoughts are.
Great. So submit all that to Rob and ask for a report
Just
back.
one other idea, you could invite him to come to our next meeting and talk to us about it, and we could all talk about it together.
Yes, and he will be here at the next meeting.
Great. All right, so we'll add a request for Rob to give us some feedback on this at the next meeting.
I second the motion if it's in the form of a motion still.
Yeah, I think it is. Were you ready to vote, or does anyone else have anything else to say? All right, let's take a vote on that.
I would just say one more thing about that. Mr. was Mark's comments didn't really get captured in your motion, other than, he said a lot of things for 3 minutes, and I'm not sure exactly what his recommendations are that you're including in the motion, just for clarity purposes.
Yeah, I don't think he stated them into the record. There are specific ordinances cited as well as maintenance suggestions. So rather than try to include all of that, I would just like Melissa to reflect that from his comments. You'll be able to go back and add in the specific ordinances that he mentioned. Yeah, if you want to hand that to Melissa, that's great. She'll have it on the YouTube as well. So I just thought that was a cleaner than trying to recite it all here.
He's essentially just advocating for adherence to standards. So I think it's pretty readable.
Right. Cool. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Does anybody else want to weigh in before we vote?
Just to clarify, the motion was made by the chair and then seconded by Mark Cheney?
That's correct.
Okay.
All right, that motion passes with all 6 members present voting yes. Which brings us to something I'm very excited about, action item number 3, which is discussion on tree species list. And Mark, I know you've done a lot of preparation here. Would you like to take it from here and let us know where you are?
Sure, I can. Melissa, can you put up the text file?
Hanson's got it. There we go.
Okay, that's the spreadsheet.
It should
that's a
be
spreadsheet.
3B.
Yeah. So this, we don't have to read through this, but the gist of it is that in going through the city advice on what trees to plant where, I sort of ended up grouping it in 2 broad categories. One is the street tree guidance and rules, and then the other is what tree should I plant in my yard somewhere. And I think the first thing to do for us as a city body is to sort of clean up the mess that's out there now. And what I've listed as steps 1 through 4 are sort of identify all the conflicting, bad, obsolete, counterproductive places that this guidance is. And I went through and identified where I thought the problems were and what we should do about it. Appendix D, well, first of all, the Urban Forest Management Program Administrative Manual of Procedures is our guiding document on how to deal with trees in the street. And Appendix D, several years ago, we set about updating that. We came up with this giant list. And one of the things that actually our chairman, Brad, did when he first came here a few years ago was he winnowed that list down to trees that we could feel safe supporting as street trees. And Melissa, if you'll put up the spreadsheet at this point, there should be 2 tabs. This looks like, yeah, that's not. So what is this? Street tree selection guide. So I guess I'm used to looking at an Excel spreadsheet with 2 tabs in it. Okay, it looks like what we're seeing here is the first couple of pages is the first tab, and then after that is the second tab. Okay, so this first part, which I think has maybe 68 trees or something like that, is what Brad brought to the UFAC a few years ago as a suggestion for these are approved trees, and here are the conditions where they would be helpful. And at the time, the UFAC expressed support for this list from Brad and somehow did not go anywhere with it. And I'm suggesting that this first part here be used to replace what's in Appendix D of that administrative manual. Appendix D is seriously out of date, has a lot of bad information in it. And I'd like to just out and out replace it with this first part. And if you'll roll down a little bit, Melissa. Let's see. Okay, so that's the end of this recommendation list. And if you roll down a little bit more, just to explain what's that. What this is, this was taken from our tree inventory in Encinitas. It listed all the trees and what they're good for and what they're not good for, and problems and advantages of them and things like that. This is too large of a list, of course, and contains all the bad trees as well. I don't think we want to use this in an official capacity at this point, but I don't know. So we can roll back up. And what's that? That one took us like 3 years to do, and that was done. That was one of the first things that UFAC did, was recognize that these tree lists are a mess, and what are we going to do about it? How are we going to create a recommended street tree planting list? And so we took the inventory of all the street trees in the city and went through and worked with Quail Gardens, as Tony remembers.
The first time this came in front of me was 2017 sometime.
Yeah, it was quite a while ago. Anyway, it came up with this huge list and documented. And then when Brad came on a few years ago, he took the ball and sort of ran with that and said, because we all recognize this is too much information for someone to use to sort of look through that and find a tree they wanted to plant. And so Brad took that on and came up with this list of whatever it is, 60-something trees, I think, that are suitable for street trees. And I think this is a great replacement for Appendix D of that administrative manual. So maybe my first thought is that we could recommend that the administrative manual be updated with this first tab. I know a lot of people in this group now haven't seen it probably. They may or may not want to review it, but at the time this came in, the UFAC supported this list, and I think as a first step to just removing one of the biggest problems, it would be to adopt this and recommend this replace Appendix D of the administrative manual. I don't know, Brad, if you have a procedural thought about that, or if anybody else has a...
Yeah, I want to, as much as I like to maintain forward momentum, I want to pump the brakes here just a little bit. From what I recall on this was just we never really got into this list very deeply from what I remember. What I remember doing, and it was a couple years ago, was kind of a first pass with just some basic parameters of, I want to say, height, width, and maybe root damage potential or something along those lines, making sure they weren't invasive. There's kind of just one filter I put on to create this list. There wasn't a ton of thought put into, beyond just a real first pass of kind of making sure there wasn't major problem trees on here. But looking at this, I don't necessarily want to say that I'm giving my personal stamp of approval to every tree on this list, because there's some that I might not get behind. So I do kind of big picture, though, procedurally, I think we have a really good lineup on the committee right now to dive into this a little bit further. And not to derail too far from where you were heading, but my kind of thought with where we could go with this whole list thing is kind of, a few months ago, someone brought up the idea of like an easy thing. One of the easy things to do within this conversation is create a do not plant list. We have the invasive species list, and I think we could probably add to that based on the knowledge we have here. So that was kind of one section of this conversation I thought that we'd be able to handle really well. And then beyond that, I was kind of, thinking of trying to create a favored plant list, but also I think it's really important to leave a lot of leeway for the city arborist to make determinations in the field. And if we have a healthy do not plant list and we know that none of those trees will ever be recommended, that's a great start. If we have a favored plant list of things we want to favor, whether it's for nativity or just generally doing well in the area, or, we could get into trees that do well in park strips or certain situations. But knowing how important species diversity is across the city, wanting to leave a lot of leeway for the city arborist to make some decisions in the field. Those were kind of the two things I had in mind. But I also just want to state very clearly, I'm not opposed to taking this on pretty substantially for not just this meeting, but potentially a few more to kind of get a little further into that. Does that change any of your thoughts here?
I do have a couple of comments about that. First, I didn't mean to imply that this list was vetted and that this list is perfect. But where I was trying to go with this is to make this to be a first of an iterative process, because if we say, let's take this back and look at it, I've seen this happen now for my entire tenure here, which is pretty long. And that what happens is in a year or 2 or 3, we have another list, and then we go through this again. So I agree that we should have, and we do have an opportunity for people to go off list and ask the city arborist or to put on their plan, hey, I want to put in these trees, things like that. What this list is if you pick one off this list, you can see what kind of situations it's good for, and if you put it in the right place, you don't have to worry about somebody coming back and complaining. So I guess that's and I actually do appreciate that you want to address this in a thoughtful way, and I don't mind if somebody was to take ownership of this tonight and say, I'll bring a list back that's perfect in January. That would be great. But what I don't want is just sort of a generic, let's come up with a perfect list, because there is not one, and we all know perfect is the enemy of good enough. What's in there now is so bad that I want to replace it with almost anything, even if what we do is we say, Appendix D, to be supplied later.
I understand and sympathize with that desire for sure. I'm going to take a wild guess here that Committee Member Gurno has a few things to say about this.
I have really gradient opinions on this, and I don't need to get too in the weeds until somebody cues me in that respect. But I do have something that's more kind of categoric and a little bit black and white to say about this subject generally. And I think that it's really, really critical that we build flexibility into this, whatever the kind of ultimate product is. And I think that part of why that is critical is because the thing that I think that Mark has very well kind of cataloged here is a lack of clarity in the messaging as it relates to what tree should be here on behalf of the city historically. And that's until very recently, in fact, because at the city council meeting where they voted on the native plant demonstration garden, they were voting to remove healthy, mature iterations of some of the trees that we are actively recommending that people plant and that are actively being planted by the other hand of our very city. And so I see a lot of unfortunate ambiguity all the way through this kind of presentation to the public. And I think that if we can strike at that, regardless of the details, the specifics, I think there's something really good to come out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this has always been something I felt that is really particular to I can't think of anything more on the nose of what this committee should be for. So how about we try this from the other side? What's like the other than decluttering and getting rid of bad lists, can you humor me and just lay out like what is the ideal vision that we're trying to get to here at the end?
So I'd say the vision is twofold. One is the clarity that Tony mentioned, and people planting street trees and getting some guidance from the city about what's okay to plant. And I would say the long-term goal of this is just to make that process easy. Right now, there are so many lists, they're very hard to find, the information in them is bad. That's sort of the goal, is to clean that up. And then I guess in helping the public find the right tree and encourage planting good trees, we need to have that guidance in place. And then later on, maybe there's a way to make the decision process easy for them also. And I'll go on record as saying I'm 100% in agreement that we don't want a city with 68 tree species in it, period. Or especially not native trees, because how many is that? That's a dozen maybe. But what's the other? You had another question about. I'm sorry, I spaced one of your comments, Brad, that I wanted to speak to. Maybe it'll come back to me, but.
That sounds like a pretty good goal to me. I mean, pretty straightforward and practical.
Yeah, and I think my recommendations here are sort of step by step. First, we have to give people a list that we have some confidence in, even if it's not perfect and even if it's going to be revised every year. And also give people some flexibility there if they say, I think this tree would be good here, to have the arborist sign off on that, which he already does, they already do. So after that, we have a list that we can refer to, and all these other lists that Public Works and the fire department and this group and that group have put together now can refer to a list that it actually makes sense. And now I remember what my other response to your comment was, Brad. You asked, well, shouldn't we just have a do not plant list and a we like these trees list to start out with? We have that, actually, and we have a not terrible version of that. The city refers to the city of San Diego and the county lists of invasive species and things like that. And the city says, don't plant these and things like that. So those lists are actually not bad. It's just that it's sort of scattered about and hard to find for people.
Right, yeah, that was the issue I was referring to, is making that more clear. And I've always thought that there could be some things beyond the invasive list from San Diego that should be on the do not plant list.
Yeah, so we have do not plant lists from the fire department because these things go up like a tiki torch, and we have do not plant lists for invasive species, things like that. And I think it would be helpful if we as a body could sort of help make that material digestible to people.
Yeah, that's clearly the goal here. And then Hanson, can you remind me, when someone does, what is there a specific, out of all these lists that Mark has highlighted for us, is there a specific one that you go to when someone requests a tree to be planted? Or are you kind of flying by the seat of your pants a bit there?
I do not particularly look at these lists very often, to be honest with you. There's a couple different things, right? Because it's like, how is this list used? And a lot of the context that you guys use this list is informing the public. But usually in like a pick your tree possibility, they're not looking for, lists are helpful to be able to give them and guide them, but it's not like they go to the website and look for the list and then contact me. It's the other way around. But to get back to your question, most of the time I don't look at a list. There's a couple situations where I do, depending on like if it's downtown, right? My hands are tied a little bit with what we can plant there. But most of the time, I find that the best interaction with getting people to actually plant trees is trying to find trees that they're actually interested in. Because I find that if the relationship between the person who lives there and the street tree, which can oftentimes in the city be very problematic, is a good, healthy one, then that's really like the goal. And as long as it doesn't, click off any other boxes, like it's not on a do not plant list, it's not on an invasive list, or like has the potential to kind of go that way, not overplanted, or, and then we kind of go more into where in the city is it, and then it's, suggestions. You're like, okay, like this spot. Oftentimes the resident will have more information than I will about the spot. Like, oh man, all these trees have died because this particular parkway gets a ton of random water. It's just like no one would know except for the residents. So they're like, oh, I really don't want, it has to be a water-loving species, even though that's not sometimes what the city would choose. So it's really like about the site specifically, is it in a parkway? And then you do all your other checks like high voltage, making sure that the tree, that's really my biggest pushback is like if they want a tree and I'm like, that cannot reach its full potential, or, so the biggest goals for us are that the tree can reach full maturity and not have to be pruned and disfigured in the process, and that it makes the right sense in the space in terms of water and clearances and, the surrounding vegetation. And then from that point, I like to really try to get people interested in what would be, something that they're excited about seeing grow and maintain. I do, occasionally go to lists. I'm super interested in this personally, and I think it's really helpful even for me to, there's so many trees and there's a lot of change in this environment, like fire is constantly kind of changing and regulating what we can do and what we shouldn't plant. So that's always evolving. So I support Tony's, we can't make it too limited, and it's kind of hard to, if you make it really limited, then we're gonna have to be doing this, to Mark's point, like every couple of years, and it's just such a big haul. Because then it's like we get the Native Council to come in and they want certain things. So, and then there's a lot of trees that we haven't explored. If you like listen to Matt Ritter talk about any of the stuff, of like, should we be looking at different places in the world that are headed to, a similar climate where we are, or like some oaks from, down south. So it's like, should we really like, have some experimental trees in here? So I really don't want to limit as much. And like I said, as long as there's not a bunch of do nots, or like this species isn't going to do well, it's not going to fit, it's not a really terrible tree for that environment, then I really try to just like get the resident excited about that tree.
So that's a good point. I had a long conversation with Chris Colstrand about this, about what he uses. And basically, as Hanson said, he uses his judgment and he works with the adjacent property owner about what they want, things like that. And he said he sort of has this list as reference, which is good for him. And what's funny is this one that's on display here, the long list with hundreds of trees. What's funny is this is totally invisible to the public, so they don't know what to do other than have a conversation with the city arborist, and then other parts of the city, they all have their own list. They all use a different list. It's really, I think we can do better without compromising the flexibility that we all want.
Yeah, I think,
Just say one more thing.
Of course.
I do agree that at least in my capacity, I think there's a lot of good that could come from we love these trees list, or, like this list, if it goes through and gets approved and looks great, like I think there's a lot of public good that can happen with people that plant whatever they want in their yards. But for me, in my official capacity, sometimes it is easy to or it's helpful to be like, okay, we can't have this tree because of, it's not on this do not plant list. So that I find to be a little bit more helpful. And then another thing that I try to focus on with people, just popped in my head, was that often I tell people, go walk around your specific neighborhood and see which trees look good to you, All this information, if it's in the street, is public. Or send me a picture of it. Or, I get a lot of people that are like, I was in Malibu and here's these pictures of these trees. And I think seeing what's growing well in your own community is a really important aspect.
absolutely, yeah. And I mean, number one thing I want to highlight is that knowing that you are there as kind of the final check, giving you leeway to make those determinations based on the information you've gathered from the resident or just from the site conditions is probably the most important thing in all of this. But you mentioned Matt Ritter, which reminded me, do you know, does Select Tree have an option within, I mean, it's one of the best website in terms of pictures and information and tracking species and size and root damage potential and all those things that are really important for this. Is there a mechanism within Select Tree that we could create something with a zip code that people could go and reference some of these things? Because as these lists get longer and we're presenting options to people, I'd like to give them a reliable source of information on how to kind of, make some judgments once you've given them some options.
Yeah, I mean, I've obviously you've probably used the list before, and you can search, and the functions they're okay. Sometimes they're not super specific, or like it's hard for an outside entity to really understand the city. Like it's hard for me sometimes to even really fully understand like why all the trees are doing well or one tree doesn't do well, and so it takes a lot to know that the specifics of the city and the site. As far as lists go, like say, which I think is a cool feature that they serve, is that we could make our own list and have it publicly held on that website, and then, you could shoot people to that list and you could maintain it in that way. Like I can take them off, I can put them on, whoever would be the entity that is responsible for that list. But there's a lot of cities that have lists that are maintained in that website.
That seems really useful to me because you could send someone there and then they have options to search by maybe even like flower color or size or deciduous or not deciduous, those kinds of things. If there's something they're looking for, I like creating it within that website that gives the public some of their own ability to narrow down from there with pictures and information on that site.
Yeah. And I'll have to look into if you create a specific list as a user on that site and then you make it a public list, I'm not confident, or I'm not positive, we'll have to look at this, if you can search those criteria within that specific list. Maybe someone else knows, but I'm not confident.
That would be my hope, is that if we went so far as to create an Encinitas specific list on that site, that they would be able to use those filters within that list.
Yeah. And I know Katrina has spoken in the past about trying to get this as like a button on the, like we've done a bunch of iterations of this in some sense. So yes, yeah, I think it could be really helpful, and it just managed. And I think to the point of Mark is that it's always going to be a project, this list, as things change. So finding the easiest path forward to manage change is really should be a focus on it.
Yeah.
Because it's not about really the limitation, it's about being flexible and adjusting and just having solid, good information, And part of the hard thing about this list or species is it takes a long time to know that a tree is not a great tree. We're dealing with the repercussions of the past. Even if we're planting experimental trees that sound really great now, we don't know how they're going to be in 50 years or 40 years. Hopefully they make it, that long. But so I think it takes a little bit of time, and I think that's what makes trees specifically a little hard.
Yeah, that's a good point, because even 15 years ago, somebody came up with a recommended street tree list, and it was all palm trees, There are some advantages to palm trees, but they don't really meet what the city wants in a tree right now.
You'd be surprised at how many people who do request trees request a queen palm, which is the overrepresented tree in the city. And so I like everything that's being said, and my hope would be that if somebody is totally a lay person from the public, that they have better resources, because otherwise they're going to ask for queen palms.
So I'll, just to summarize where I think we are, and maybe some next steps. So in the document here, the one that's displayed, I really think that Brad's list, as preliminary as it is 10 times better than the one that's there. If we walk out of here tonight and decide not to replace Appendix D with this list now, that's fine. I would really like to get rid of Appendix D with a to be supplied, even tonight, if we could, or we could recommend that. Beyond that, let's say at some point we do end up with an Appendix D that we are happy with, and I'm open to changing the administrative manual to not even have an Appendix D with recommended trees in it and to refer that to somewhere else. But right now, we do have one, and it's bad. So I would like to remove that. But beyond that, once we have what the rest of my text document is once we have an Appendix D that we can actually stand behind, then we can start getting rid of these other bad lists everywhere and just refer them to Appendix D or refer them to what our solution is, rather than everybody, oh, the planning maintains this list, fire department maintains this list, the city ordinance refers to the San Diego list or the county list or things like that.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's a red Sharpie I'd like to take to this list to a number of things. I'm looking at liquid amber staring me in the face right now. And if we want to move forward with a version of this, I can see doing that if we're able to take this down by a number of trees. I also like the idea of just saying this will be supplied and, having an improved list in January, I think is well within our capabilities if we were to form a subcommittee.
I'm happy to help in whatever capacity makes sense on this, because I already went through this with the assistant city manager way back in the day, so I do kind of have a good background understanding of what we can try to have happen. And to be totally frank with everybody, the city staff and the city team is doing better than any of this list represents. Like, what's being put into the parks and Arbor Day, what's actually going into the streetscapes is better than what's in these lists. So at least we could kind of have the literature catch up to the good work that is being done.
That's actually a great point. I do appreciate the city and West Coast Arborists and Dudek. They're actually obviously much better with their recommendations and their guidance and their knowledge of these trees than what the lists represent. I just hate having these official lists out there that are so bad.
Totally. And so I'm wondering if is there anything other than this reference to Appendix D that we could update? Because now I'm thinking, there's the fire department has their list. Do we have any? We don't really have any say over that, right? They're going to have.
So Melissa, can you get rid of the spreadsheet and flip back to the text file? Okay, so Appendix D is item 1. We have so many lists on this city. Item 2, here's these 5 neighborhoods that all have their own list. Item 3 is Public Works has their own list. And people have put a lot of work into these and a lot of thought, and they're just old and outdated and obsolete. And yes, the fire department has their list. They don't pretend to have tree people in the fire department itself. They reference other lists. So I guess my thought is, before we start, thinking about all these other lists that are scattered around, improving that, I just wanted to have our fundamental list in place so that we could sort of then address all the subsequent lists.
Seems like we need to either make a motion to continue to work on the list with the task force and replace the bad list with a to-be supplied list? Or replace it with the list that is here and then revise it shortly after?
Where I'm thinking we head is beyond just updating to say, a new Appendix D is coming. Is there anything else we can do tonight to deactivate any other bad lists anywhere? Is that the only one that's kind of directly under our control?
So nothing is directly under our control.
Well, yeah.
We advise. I just, the city owns a lot of these lists, like the neighborhood lists,
We've kinda done
public
this-
works lists.
yeah.
So we can sort of start advising all of them immediately. I just thought we should, the one that's closest to us is this administrative manual, the Urban Forest Administrative Manual. So I thought we should get our own act together, and then we can start, maybe helping others fix theirs.
I have a question. So let's say we agreed tonight that we love this new list, okay, and that everybody wanted to get it going. What is the process? What do we need to do to move anything forward to change the administrative manual or have any impact on any of these other lists? So what are the mechanics?
I'm waiting for Brad to ring in, but since he's not, I'll say I don't know exactly, but we would. I think that maybe the city council has to change the administrative manual, or it's possible Public Works can do it. I'm not sure. Public Works.
I think that this would be something that we would formulate as a recommendation to go to Sylvester and his team.
And would Public Works have say over these neighborhood-specific plans?
It depends. And this is one of the little asterisks that we're going to have to entertain, because there are certain things that even the city doesn't actually have the ultimate purview over. So in 2019, when we were doing the Arbor Day planting in the numbered letter streets downtown, basically west of 101, and we were trying to put in 100 trees. We ended up putting in 49 trees, and that was because flowering trees in that zone are actually under the purview of the Coastal Development Commission. And so in certain cases, there are like full-blown plans that have gone up through a state level of approval that doesn't make sense for us to interfere with in any kind of hopeful, beneficial way. So some of this stuff is what Hansen was describing as what is already being taken. There's already a lot of liberty being taken and discretionary actions being made. And so those kind of street by street neighborhood planting plans might be good to, if they're not like something that relates to other regulatory ambitions or compliance stuff, just like scrap them.
I'm looking for how much can we scrap right now? Because that seems like these aren't being used. We have good people doing good work. So the more disinformation we can remove or recommend for removal from websites, from the city website, from wherever they are, that seems like pretty clear step one to me.
Yeah, as Tony said, there are extenuating circumstances, but really, I think we could scrap Appendix D. We can scrap. It's possible we can. I mean, as a city, not as a UFAC, but as a city, we could scrap our neighborhood plans. I think we can scrap the Public Works street by street planting suggestions. Those are the three that I think are directly on us.
And also, we've identified they're outdated. They're not really being followed anyway. So scrapping them does not.
They don't appear to be used. They're just sort of dead documents on the website that the city has come up with over time.
And so we could recommend to Public Works. Are all of those three that we mentioned through Public Works?
I would be happy to try to get Public Works to do this and have them push back where they can't.
Got it.
Good idea.
So I'm thinking that tonight we scrap whatever we can. We form a subcommittee to come back in January with recommendations on a consolidated do not plant list, a new and improved Appendix D. I don't know if it will still be called Appendix D or, a new improved version of that, as well as some language explicitly giving leeway to city arborists to use their discretion based on site conditions and their knowledge. That to me seems like if we can clear out a bunch of the junk and then come up with a bad list, a good list, and leeway for the city arborist. Is there something I'm missing within that view there?
I really like that as a first step, and I see that as two motions. One, to delete obsolete and unused information throughout the city. And then the other one, to form the subcommittee to come up with recommendations on what we replace it with.
Is there anyone else that is feeling like anything needs to be added to that conversation there?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I actually haven't been part of a subcommittee on anything like this, so I don't know how it actually operates, but I'll volunteer to lead that or participate, whatever it would look like.
Yeah, I would love to do that with you. It's basically you and I work on it and report back. Okay, so let's make a motion to recommend to Public Works to scrap, to scrap Appendix D, the neighborhood plant palettes, and number 3 here, the list from the Public Works Urban Forest Management Program webpage. Is there anything else we can add to that?
No, I don't think, I think that's what we discussed. I'll second that.
Great. Excellent. So that passes with all 6 members present voting yes. So then the second motion will be to form a subcommittee with myself and committee member Gurno to come back in January with a do not plant list, a consolidated do not plant list, a new and improved Appendix D that we can consider a favored tree list, and some language to explicitly give the city arborist leeway to make decisions based on site conditions.
I'll second that motion.
Can we give that subcommittee a name?
Tony and Brad's subcommittee.
Great. All right. So that is approved with all 6 members present voting yes. Is there anything else we need to discuss on this action item?
So I do have a question. We have and maybe Melissa can shed some light on this. We do have Brown Act considerations when we meet, when some of us on the committee meet outside of a public meeting. And I know that if there are 2 people from the subcommittee meeting, and maybe others as well outside the UFAC, that's perfectly fine. What I'm not sure is if there's a 3rd person from UFAC that's on this subcommittee, if that poses a problem. Melissa, do you know?
I was told by the clerk to keep it by 2 to be safe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Keep it to 2. Okay, in that case, if somebody on the subcommittee wants to take my document that pretty much has all my thoughts, that'll be my input to the subcommittee.
Great. Yeah. I mean, it's part of the record now, so we can use it. And then everyone will obviously have a chance to weigh in when we bring it back. Is there anything else that anyone would like to state for the record now before we take it into subcommittee world? Great, and yeah, then when I asked about this subcommittee for the mature tree ordinance, I was just told if it's 2 people and they report back, at the meeting what was done, that's all compliant from my understanding. Great, I'm excited about that. Is there anything else on this item that we need to discuss? All right, then we'll go on to item number 4 at 6:56 p.m. Agenda items for future UFAC meetings. There was discussion of acacia cyclops that had been brought up by a member of the public. Hanson, I believe we had talked about a report on that next month. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you'd like, we can do a brief report on how that request pertains to the purview of the city.
Great.
Because if I remember correctly, that was more specifically directed at the the wildland areas of Encinitas. But we can, from a city standpoint, talk about the trees that we have in the parks and.
I have one comment that I think is relevant for people about that specific subject. The acacia cyclops is like a big upright acacia. It's invasive, but the way that I wrote the Encinitas Habitat Stewardship contract proposal was based on specific guidance from City Council at that time, and it explicitly excludes the removal of anything that's bigger than 6-inch diameter at standard height from those natural spaces, regardless of it being an invasive species. And so it was Brad Roth who came in here, and he's very well versed with the Cottonwood Creek kind of natural areas. But just in case this is a useful messaging tool for anybody who's talking with people like him, that there are certain of those that will remain, and it relates to bird nesting and raptor perching, all that kind of stuff.
All right, thank you for stating that there. Now that we have the mature tree ordinance behind us and the species list in progress, I know that next month, and by the way, I will not be here next month, so Linda, you will be running the show. But there's going to be a kind of more formal presentation of the UFAC accomplishments list that I believe is supposed to go to council in November. I want to say
November 12th. That's what we're planning for.
How many of us are required for quorum? I won't be here next month either.
as long as we have 4, so we should be okay. So Matt Altman's not going to be here. I won't be here. Everybody else here, as far as you know, hopefully Mim will be back to full health by then. So there will be an accomplishments discussion next month, and unless there's any specific requests, I'll just go back to the work plan and go back through some emails to see what else there is for the agenda, and Linda, I can loop you in on that since you'll be running that one. Is there anything else anyone would like to bring up for a future meeting?
I would like to bring up something, and it's of no temporal importance, but I think that it would be an interesting subject to bring to this floor. There's been public comments about things like procedures related to pruning trees during nesting season. And I know that there are trainings and there are things that are done that are invisible to the public on behalf of the people who do manage the trees physically in our city. And I think that if nothing else, it would be nice for us to just get some kind of a overview of how that actually works. What does it look like when somebody from our city is going to prune trees and it's during nesting season? You know, what do they actually do? And I think that might help to kind of inform and appease some of those public concerns.
Great. Melissa, is there anything I'm forgetting that we've been talking about that may be coming up soon?
Did you guys want to put the tree visibility and traffic safety issue again for next month? Or
I don't think I guess if there's a report to be had by then, if Public Works has something to give back to us by next month, that'd be great. Yeah.
okay.
Let's hear that.
So I do have one comment on the accomplishments list. Who owns that?
In terms of us,
So somebody's gonna give a presentation next month. Who on this committee is doing that?
I will do some work before I leave, before the next meeting, to take what you did and compile everything we can in terms of what my understanding of the presentation we need to put together is. And then I'm happy to take that to council in November. I think probably you and I should be there in November to present it to council, as most of that's going to be have occurred under your tenure.
Yeah, that's fine. If the accomplishments list is going to be on the agenda for next month, I don't want us all to just look at each other and say, oh, I thought you were going to do something.
Yeah, I will do it, and I will likely email you for some input on that.
Okay, and I can discuss it in the meeting then.
Great, perfect.
Okay.
Great. Is there anything else anyone would like to bring up for a future meeting? Awesome. All right, then I think we will adjourn the meeting at 7:01 p.m. Thank you all so much.